Are you able to hear me? Cool.
We are.
Okay, I can hear you too. Thank you.
Hey, everyone.
Good evening.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you, Andrew?
Good. Good.
Thanks, Tammy, Abby, and Terry for being here.
Glad to do it. It's always fun to come out and meet everybody.
Yeah. Looks like we're waiting on quite a few people, so tight.
Leah, it's Miranda. Can you hear me? I'm using a different mic. Yes. Okay. I think I'll just go ahead and send some text messages. Have you sent any messages out to people?
No.
Okay. I'm going to send them out right now.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your patience as we get the rest of our folks here. We have to have quorum in order to start.
Can you all hear me?
I know, Miranda, I know Maddie can't make it tonight,
Okay.
but I don't know about anyone else.
So Rich just sent me a message that maybe that sounds like the password didn't work for him. Melody's saying her WebEx is loading. She'll be here in 10 minutes, but you'll still need one more.
Okay, so you said Melody's on the way. Who was
Yeah.
the other person?
Just Melody. Rich is already on. I'm just saying Rich was saying that it sounds like he had some issues joining. So just
Oh.
confirming people aren't having that issue.
No, I was able to get on okay. So yeah, we're still missing a fourth though.
Yeah, once Melody gets on, you still need one more. Maybe something to chat about later, because I feel like this is now the and we've been here before. Oh, good. Chris is here.
We've been here before. It's like a Lord of the Rings quote, right? There we go. We got some smiles. This isn't lost. It's not for nothing.
Miranda, is Rab included in your outreach, or would you like me to give him a
I think so,
call?
but it made it look like the message didn't go through. Maybe could you text me his phone number and I can make sure what I have is his phone number?
Yes.
Evening, everybody. Sorry I'm a few minutes late tonight. Work ran a little bit long, so here now.
Well, we're glad you're here. We were having a quorum moment where we're like, what's gonna happen? So.
I feared that. Yep, and I apologize. We're dog sitting, so it might be a little bit of a noisy background with an extra large dog in the house.
You're good. We're actually still Melly's having some technical issues. We're still waiting for her, and then when she gets on, we'll get started.
Okay. I think I'm finally here. Thank you, everybody. So we've got myself, Nicole, Rich, and Chris. So we have a quorum, so we can call the meeting to order at 6:55 p.m. And of just a few slight changes to the agenda. So we are going to spend less time on number 2 and really dive into that next month, which is just talking to town staff about sustainability and their day-to-day operations and how we can support them in that. And so we can spend a little bit more time on a few of the other things if we'd like. But the first thing we've got is the results of our gap analysis. So I don't know if you want to give a little intro, Leah, before passing it off to them, or if Partners in Energy just wants to start. But we can go ahead with that.
Actually, I'll let Partners in Energy introduce themselves. I think they'll do a better job. So take it away.
Great. I'm going to kick us off, and I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. And we can get started. We'll do intros as part of the presentation. All right. Are you all seeing a PowerPoint presentation in like presenter mode, not seeing the notes?
Yes.
Great. Okay. And so I'm going to be controlling the slide deck today. I can't see you all anymore, so please feel free to interrupt at any time and ask questions. As was teed up, we are here today to talk about the Town of Nederland's renewable energy goal and the gap analysis that was completed to understand where you all are in terms of meeting that goal. And so my name is Abby Neal. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm a Partners in Energy Community Facilitator, and I'm going to be kicking us off today. And on the call, we also have Tammy from Excel Energy. So Tammy, I don't know if you want to do a brief intro.
So say I'll pop on quick. Tammy Gunders, like she mentioned, I'm with our customer solutions area at Excel, working with our equity programs. And so our community program falls into that.
Thanks, Tammy. And then I also have my colleague Terry Hatfield with us today. Terry, do you want to jump on and say hi?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Terry Hatfield. With Partners in Energy as well as a facilitator. I've been, for this project, primarily focusing in the back end on data analysis to perform the gap analysis itself. But
Great.
Nice to meet everyone.
And so we've been working with Leah and Miranda on this from the Town of Nederland side. And so thank you to them as well for helping kind of shepherd and guide us through this process. And so as it was alluded to, why we are here today is to understand the Town of Nederland's progress towards your all's goal. So your goal is to have 100% renewable electricity by 2025, which is just around the corner. It's 2030. So, or not 2030, it's 2023. But not to kind of spoil what's to come in the upcoming slide, but you know, there is a pretty substantial gap into meeting that 2025 goal. And so the purpose of today is to understand kind of the results of that gap analysis and where you all are at, and discuss options for, you know, how the town wants to move forward with that goal. And so we're going to talk about 3 different options: keeping the current goal, potentially adjusting the timeline, or identifying a different path. And so once we run through those 3 options, we'll spend the last 20 minutes or so talking about next steps. And so that's the outline for the next 50-ish minutes. And so I'm going to turn it over to Terry to ground us on
Thanks, Abby. So yeah, just before we dig into any of the detail, I wanted to spend some time talking about kind of common terms. And so really wanted to hone in on what is carbon-free energy versus renewable energy. Some of this may be repetitive for some of you, but hopefully it's useful for all as well. In the state of Colorado, the electricity grid is really generated from a number of different sources. You can kind of see the 5 primary ones here, with the top 2 being natural gas and coal. Those are our fossil fuels. And then we have a pretty big component of wind and solar. And then lastly, hydro on the bottom there. And so in the state of Colorado, there is what's called a renewable portfolio standard that defines what is renewable and what utilities can claim as renewable. And so the top two are non-renewable and also non-carbon free. These are the fossil fuels. But both wind and solar are both carbon free and renewable. And kind of what that means is that it's in terms of renewable, it's always being replenished. You know, the sun is continuing to shine, the wind blows pretty consistently. So it's considered a renewable source. But when you think about the state of Colorado's RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, hydro is actually only sometimes considered renewable. Most of the time it is not considered renewable, but it is considered a carbon-free resource, similar to how wind and solar are carbon-free in that they are not generating carbon emissions when they're generating electricity, really at any time scale. So I know that there was a question when we were putting the slide deck together on hydro itself, and that you were looking into an energy storage capability in the town of Nederland, kind of evaluating water pumping. Was anyone on this call bringing that comment forward, and would it be helpful to kind of chat through that at all? Not seeing anybody unmuting, so
Yeah,
I'll just.
I don't think that was any of us who were on the call this evening that were kind of really pushing that idea.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, anytime we talk about renewable energy, that's aligned with what the town of Nederland's goal is. Renewable energy credits are really what comes into play. And so on the next slide, I'll go through kind of what RECs are and why we should care about them. So really, anytime we're generating renewable electricity from those renewable energy sources, wind, solar, we're producing renewable energy credits, and it's equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity generation. And really, it's a conduit to be able to claim renewable energy generation. And there's essentially a marketplace for RECs based on actual generating wind and solar farms, for example. But really, counting those up and accounting for RECs at the end of the day helps prevent any sort of double counting for meeting renewable energy goals. And so as we think about the current goal, I just want to kind of go through some of our understanding to see if there's other bits that we want to make sure we fill in that maybe we're not privy to. So on the next couple slides, we can start to go through that. So the current goal is 100% renewable electricity by 2025. This was put into place from the former mayor, who accelerated it from the original timeline of 2030. And our understanding is that it did not take into consideration REC ownership. And so, you know, essentially, we wanted to understand if my apologies. In terms of community engagement, kind of wanted just to understand what the residential priorities have been, and really just understand that where we thought the town would be a lot further toward that goal based on kind of projected participation levels in the programs. So for example, with the Solar Rewards Community Program, expected to see a bit higher level of participation in that program to help meet that goal. That didn't end up coming to fruition. And so I just wanted to pause here and see, do we have a kind of a good understanding based on kind of this slide of the current renewable electricity goal for the town of Nederland? Would you add any additional context that would be helpful?
Terry, this is Rich Orman. My question on this slide is the goal did not consider rec ownership. Does that mean like solar systems that people have on their houses and generate their own power? It's not considered
in a way
towards meeting the goal? Okay.
So there are a few programs from Xcel Energy where we can kind of measure progress towards the goal based on participation and kind of the level of generation that participation results in. And there are two programs, Solar Rewards Community, which is the community solar gardens, as well as Solar Rewards, which is on-site rooftop solar, for example, where both of those programs, the customer who's installing that solar or subscribing to the garden is selling the renewable energy credits back to Xcel Energy. In which case it still contributes to the overall grid's renewable electricity makeup, but doesn't contribute kind of any more over and above that grid supplied electricity, if that makes sense.
Hey, Terry, this is Chris Larson. I'm that former mayor that is responsible for all of this. Yeah, we didn't really take into consideration rec ownership for a couple reasons. One was the complexity of trying to explain it to the community, particularly back in 18 when we were starting to look at this. The descriptions we gave, the explanations were just so convoluted that basically our goal was we're going to try and just make sure that the electricity used by the businesses, residents, and government in Nederland was offset. You know, we were producing or buying that much renewable energy, either from a solar farm, from panels on top of a person's house, from, you know, Xcel's wind source program, without really concerning ourselves about who was getting the rec credit or the recs, just because that was an extra layer of accounting and we didn't have the support or the knowledge base to really tackle that back in 17 or 18. The second piece was that obviously we didn't take into account 2020 through 2022, which kind of distracted the town government from pursuing this goal because we were just trying to keep the town functioning through the pandemic. So yeah, we recognize we lost a couple years there. And then the third goal, the third piece of it was kind of recognizing from the beginning that 100% renewable by 2025 on a voluntary basis for a community our size with the independent individuals we tend to have up here. It was a good goal. It was very unlikely we're ever going to convince everyone to sign up for this on their own. There was no real hope of reaching 100% on a volunteer basis. So it was kind of a thought that by the time we were getting to that the goal was, the hope was, you know, it could get maybe, you know, 80-90% of the town's electricity, you know, on renewable, and then that last bit was going to have to be something creative at the end. So I think we may be looking just now that creative piece at the end is a larger chunk of the portfolio than we'd originally intended it to be, if that helps.
Yeah, that's excellent context. Thank you, Chris.
Chris, thanks for sharing that. I don't want to jump in too soon here. This is Erica Thorley. Chris, I want to push back on that. I think we did our homework. I think there was an extensive knowledge base at the time in 2017, and we had many discussions about RECs. And Melody, please jump in. Love to hear your thoughts. We actually followed the guidance of what the city of Boulder was identifying at the time with the additionality piece. And a big part of that was equity, because if you were to go for RECs, you can sign up for WindSource tomorrow and have RECs and really get that credit like what we're talking about here. And does that actually move the needle? That's the question. And I'm not sure if the answer is yes. The REC market itself is complicated. And like we've talked about, you put solar panels on your roof. And if you want to actually have a financial edge with those solar panels, you have to sell those RECs to Xcel. It's very, very few and far between Nederland residents that are able to actually keep those RECs and not sign on to the solar rewards program. We have had programs from Excel like Renewable Connect that were a no-brainer, right? You were able to get those RECs and sign on to a solar garden, but those were an internal Excel program. Even the community solar garden model, you know, SunShare, Solar United, or not Solar, US Solar, some of these others, those are all where the RECs are already going to be sold to Excel. That's the program that exists within legislation in the state of Colorado. So I just want to give some pushback there. We did a lot of homework as far as what other communities were doing at the time in 2017 with RECs. And I kick myself, and Melody, I'm sure you feel the same way. We should have written this down and had it somewhere and really explained kind of our rationale as far as why we didn't prioritize RECs and instead went for additionality and equity.
Yeah, thank you so much for jumping in, Erica. I was going to ask you too. I remember very similarly that in general, it wasn't so much that the community didn't understand RECs. I think for me, it was more that the community wanted to see results. They wanted to know that what they were doing was actually going to make a difference when it comes to climate change, however small that difference is, and that we far prioritized getting new renewable electricity onto the grid over can we claim those RECs or not. Like Erica mentioned, there's a cost involved with those RECs, and we understood that there's a lot of times where we're just not, even whether or not residents can afford it, the town itself also, you know, struggles with, can we purchase extra RECs to offset what we've done? Not really. And I don't think we own the RECs on our current Oak Leaf solar contract, which is kind of part of that. And so I don't know if any other SAB members feel like that's something that we should revisit, but that kind of has been our strategy so far, that we care more about the actual impact than we do about the RECs that are credited in a system and really our numbers in the table, you know. And then as far as lower participation, I feel like there's maybe two major kind of notes I have in my head on that. One is when we were originally working with Excel and signing our MOU with Excel, we were promised another round of Renewable Connect, and that we were going to be able to offer that to another round of citizens. That sold out really fast. There was a bunch of people that wanted to get on it that were never able to, especially businesses, because there's a lot of things that are not really accessible to businesses as far as getting solar or getting wind without paying some sort of premium. And so Renewable Connect was a really, you know, what we saw as a more customer benefit program than some of the other ones that Excel has been running. That is no longer a possibility anymore. And so that just makes that creative solution gap, you know, that Chris mentioned, that much larger, because now we need all of those people on a solar garden as well, instead of being able to get them some sort of solar program through Excel that's a bit more reflective of the true costs of producing solar, right? So there's issues there. And then of course the pandemic, you know, as Chris mentioned, there halted a lot of things. A lot of people didn't have any money. And then another thing I noticed is when we did the solar rebates, there was a lot of people that just had an issue with getting solar on their property. So I think there's a lot of people that would love to have solar, but either they couldn't get through the financing piece, or they just didn't have the solar orientation on their property to do so, or they needed them mounted on the ground instead of on the roof, and that wasn't, you know, part of the installer we were working with. And so there was a few different issues there that I think halted participation in that program that we kind of expected a bit more of. That's what I can remember.
Yeah, this is all really helpful context, just to kind of paint a picture of where you've been and how it might inform where we go from here. And I think for the current goal, that's one of our options. We keep the current goal. And I think it just depends on how we talk about that, right? Given the rec ownership conversation. So I want to keep us moving and talk a little bit, start to understand really what does it mean to meet the 2025 goal? How big is that gap? And so what we've done is what we're calling a gap analysis to essentially project out based on previous, historical participation in programs in combination with where the electricity grid is heading in terms of renewable energy on the grid, in combination with programs. What does that look like? And so in today, as of 2022, you're about 51% renewable, and that's projected to increase to 63% in 2025, which leaves about a 37% gap in energy or electricity usage. That's about 4 million kWh of electricity across the town's roughly 10 million kWh of electricity use on an annual basis. And on the next slide, it sort of breaks it down into the individual programs. And the way we've looked at this is on a rec accounting basis. So each of these in sort of the cyan color, that's representative of what the portion is coming from the electricity grid from Xcel Energy that goes to all customers. And so we've within that is those two solar rewards programs, Solar Rewards Community and Solar Rewards, which is again the solar gardens and the on-site solar where customers sell the RECs back to Xcel Energy. And then over and above that are additional actions that the community has been taking and is forecast to continue to take in the form of net metering, wind source, and Renewable Connect. Those are kind of the three other programs where the customer keeps the RECs, and so you can kind of count it over and above what you get from Xcel Energy. Net metering is the other on-site solar system where essentially the only difference with Solar Rewards is that the customer keeps the RECs. But Wind Source and Renewable Connect are both subscription-based programs where a customer would elect to offset essentially some or all of their electricity use to get to 100%. So this gives a little bit of a sense of at least where the community is heading and how community participation in programs has helped to increase that, but still leaves a gap.
Terry, can I ask a question about some of the accounting on this?
Sure.
Just regarding the net metering. So just when I look at I have net metering, right? So when I look at it, I can understand where you guys are. Dog, but he's barking at thunder. I can understand where you get that from, where when I export it, you guys know exactly how much I export and you give me a credit for that. But does this include, but most of the stuff that my solar roof does, it just powers my house. It's not exported. I don't know how you guys would even know how much that is. So maybe you're undercounting because you're not considering, like if I generated 25 kilowatt hours a day and exported 10, that's still 15, but I don't know that that's going to be counted.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are counting kind of the total generation. We've made an assumption of in the town of Nederland with the solar or the sun kind of shining just so, made an assumption of per, the size of the array, the capacity of the array, how much that generates. And based on the size of the array that's been installed, in aggregate across the whole community, we made an estimation of how much electricity that's generating. So made a best effort to kind of quantify what that impact is holistically, not just the amount that gets sold back to the grid.
Okay, thanks.
Chris and Erica have questions too, it looks like.
Yeah, thanks, Melody. I guess my question, Terry, is simply that, or question is, do you have statistics, or can you just do this kind of breakdown for residential versus commercial usage?
Yes, we do have that. I don't believe we have a slide on that, although we do look at kind of what's made up of in terms of municipal electricity use. But we do have that data kind of in the back end. So happy to share what that looks like after this call.
That would be great, because I just kind of thinking, I'm assuming commercial is a fairly decent size. It's a chunk, and that might be an easier next hurdle for us to tackle than some of the residential, where we've done a lot of outreach and not had a lot of impact. Not really had a whole lot of impact. I'm looking here at the black, yellow-ish, orangish bars, that those haven't changed significantly. The growth in our renewable tends to be significantly at the solar rewards community, Excel stuff. So I'm wondering just if we can have that data for the commercial, so we can start working with our businesses to try and get them on board as well.
Yeah, I can provide kind of a sector breakdown across residential, commercial, and municipal. Any other questions on this slide?
Terry, this is Erica Thorley. I just wanted to open the can of worms. What would Community Choice Energy do as far as giving us options to broker deals for renewable energy at a larger scale for the town?
Yeah, that's a good question. From a trackability perspective, I don't know that we would be able to have visibility into that long term without kind of understanding what those deals would be. But I believe the devil is in the details anytime a kind of a community choice aggregation deal is put together on who owns the RECs, essentially. So that's kind of where the question should be if that is pursued. But anyone else want to add anything to that from the Partners in Energy team?
No, I think a lot of that, it would tie it, like you said, Terry, into the contractor agreement, or when you actually made that purchase, to require it to be 100% renewable or something like that. So more out of the auspice of Excel.
Any other questions before we kind of think about where we go from here? All right, then I'll pass it over to Abby to walk through a couple next slides.
Thanks, Terry. So kind of with that background, as Terry alluded to, we're going to pivot and think about, what does the town want to do? And so before we dive into we've proposed 3 essential directions that the SAB could consider taking. This is an outline of a potential decision-making process and some next steps. So, based off of what we hear from you all today, one thing that we do want to highlight, and you all have already started to highlight this in your comments, is prioritizing community outreach to really understand what's important to the community. And, maybe that's focusing on businesses and commercial customers to ensure that whatever kind of gap is there, that we are supporting those community members in a way that can help make action happen. And so kind of with that outreach, Partners in Energy would develop a recommended approach, and then we could come back to you all and town leadership to get a thumbs up that, what we heard from you all in the community makes sense and aligns with where you all want to go. And so that said, kind of providing a little bit more detail on what we mean by community-based approach and how that would factor into each of those three options is really, it's all about creating those connections and relationships so we can understand the context of where Nederland is today, and then what we can do today to help Nederland get to whatever the goal may be. And so we would recommend implementing strategies that allow us to collect direct feedback from Nederland residents and businesses, and so that we can, understand the context of their opinions and behaviors. And so the kind of last bullet on this slide are some example questions that, that engagement could inform, whether that being understanding residential or business interests in clean energy, how that aligns with goals, what they're willing to do, what barriers might exist. If we understand those barriers, that might help us understand what support is needed to help them overcome those barriers, and what's really urgent and going to get folks moving. So kind of with that lens of a community-based approach, these are just some kind of examples of what that could look like. And so it would be, getting qualitative data from one-on-one interviews with residents, focus groups, taking advantage of the events that Nederland already has in place. For example, the September 17th Ride and Drive event, and tapping into really community networks to get that feedback and kind of align with whatever direction Nederland wants to take. So with that kind of umbrella, there are three different options that Terry's going to kind of walk us through. And so the first is to keep the current goal. And so outreach kind of around keeping the current goal might be, getting some feedback on what those creative solutions could be, getting feedback on how the town could support residents or push residents or businesses towards whatever that creative solution is. The second option is to adjust the timeline, and that outreach might stay the same even if the goal is in 2030 instead of 2025. But the timeline is just extended a little bit. And then the last would be, to potentially pivot, and maybe priorities have changed for the town or residents or the SAB, and maybe there's a different goal out there that better fits the town of Nederland for where it is today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry to provide a little bit more context about each one of these.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah. So for the current goal, we've kind of understood what the gap is to meet that one. About 4 million kWh of renewable electricity needed at that point to meet it in 2025. And so there's a number of different ways we could kind of go about this to meet that goal. Energy efficiency really should continue to be an important lever that the town pulls to really pursue that with the residents, pursue that with the businesses to lower and really optimize the electricity use in particular that is being used in the community. And so that just lessens the gap over time as folks adopt more energy efficient equipment, lighting, etc. But there's also community solar gardens, which obviously Excel Energy is retaining the RECs in this case, but that had about 31 subscribers as of this year. And then a rooftop solar campaign, I think, again, to a point that's already been made on this call, maybe focusing in on some of the commercial businesses with Solar United Neighbors to try and push rooftop solar for businesses to help make a bigger impact. Could be one option. And then with Pivot Energy, another idea could be, continuing to push on a municipal, the town building out a community solar garden, but understanding that's a little ways out and may not align with the 2025 goal. Could come right at the tail end. So all of this in combination with grid decarbonization could get you closer The other option, one of the other options, is to consider adjusting a timeline. So one idea could be that the town of Nederland aligns with Boulder County, and their goal is to reach 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And by then, our gap analysis forecasts a lesser gap, cuts it really in half from where it is in 2025, in combination with where the grid is anticipated to be in terms of renewable electricity, but also in combination with community program participation. So that 22% gap could be community-wide, but municipal facilities could really continue to push for 2025 and kind of lead the way as one idea. And so on the next slide, kind of looks at what municipal specific electricity use has been.
I think Chris might have a question before I go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just I'm curious, and this may be actually a question, Miranda, you can help out, because several years ago, the town contracted with Oakleaf and has offset all of our town municipal. So, you know, I know that that's part of this confusion with the rec stuff is that the town's municipal electrical usage has been we've been paying Oakleaf for those recs. So we've tried to do that. And that's, I think, going back to what Melody was saying earlier, and Melody and Erica with the additionality is we kind of chose to, hey, we're going to offset, we're going to do this in our way so that we're technically or effectively producing solar for our town municipal, even if the rec credit is being sold through a different source. Is that right? Are we still with Oakleaf?
You are.
Yeah.
That's true. On the next slide, it kind of digs into that a little bit more. I don't want to stifle any other questions or comments before we dig into that.
Well, this is Erica. Chris, thanks for bringing that up. Oakleaf was a slam dunk. We committed in 2017, and in 2018, in a conversation with Boulder County, we presented our challenge, and the county said, oh, sweet, we have an answer. And they were able to kind of introduce us to Oakleaf, of which the county was also subscribing and continues to subscribe. But again, that's the community solar garden model. So the RECs don't come with that. That's part of that legislation. The RECs are always going to go to the utility, Excel or Black Hills or whoever it may be. So that additionality piece, again, is kind of where we started. And with the municipal buildings, it was easy because we could make that decision for all of those accounts. We can't do that for residential and commercial, nor do we have necessarily great options for commercial. We do for residential, but that's kind of its own lift, right? But for commercial, there aren't necessarily endless amounts of commercial community solar garden subscriptions available.
And yeah, just to continue on that train of thought, so this graph is kind of looking at the amount of renewable energy generated from that solar garden, the Oakleaf solar garden. And today, or as of 2022, is generating about 84% of the town's electricity use. But as it's been said, it's a non-rec based approach, and so the gap is a bit bigger when you consider the renewable energy credits, whereby essentially you need about 359,000 kWh to make up that gap between where you are in 2022 to get to 100% by 2025. That's about 55%. You're also subscribing to wind source in a couple facilities. That's making up about 3% over and above what's called certified renewable percentage. That's the terminology that's used to define kind of what's coming from the electricity grid from Xcel Energy.
This is Melody. I have a question. So you said in 2022, our Oakleaf contract covered 84% of the municipal needs. Is that because town electricity usage has, we signed the contract?
That's a good question. I'm looking back kind of at my notes just to see, and yeah, from 2018 at least, it's increased a little less than 100,000 kWh. I don't understand. I don't have data back to 2017 to know, what that level was, but I'm thinking that is the reason why.
Just looking at your plot here on the right, it looks like roughly 100 kWh there difference between the red and the orange bars. The orange bars being what we contracted for, so what we thought in 18 we were using. That's probably just the growth in new facilities, new pumps, new we brought on a whole new piece of the wastewater treatment plant that probably wasn't accounted for in 2018's numbers. So
Harry, this is Erica again. Question for you. Can we sign the town up for 200% of its average use and help boost this number for all of town?
That is a good question, and I'm trying to think of specific programs where that might be allowed. If it's an on-site solar system, I know that the array could be sized to generate up to 200% of the electricity needs of the facility. But Tammy might need to help me out here in terms of a subscription program where you might be able to oversubscribe.
If it's a program where you're selling the RECs, you could, like your community solar garden, you could then sign up for 100% of something where you're retiring the RECs. So you could 100% wind source, 100% community solar garden. But you couldn't sign up for 100% renewable choice in wind source. You couldn't buy the RECs twice for that energy, but if you're selling the RECs and just using the renewable energy, that is allowable.
Yeah, so I think where it comes down to is what's maybe the most economical way to get there. So this is kind of the proposal to adjust the timeline to 2030 for community-wide, but keep the municipal facilities on the path to 2025, 100%. There's a third option, really, is just to re-engage with the community to really understand what their priorities are, residents and businesses and the town alike, to just understand what's important at the end of the day. Is it renewable electricity? Is it carbon-free electricity? Is it reducing carbon emissions overall? And so if we kind of take the carbon emissions approach, one example might be that a natural gas production goal could be set instead. And so what that would look like is, if you kind of look at this graph, once you address electricity, the energy emissions from natural gas and that sort of hatched three colors there on top of the electricity that goes down to 0 in 2050 remains. And so to address that, really ramping up energy efficiency opportunities, specifically on the natural gas side, and electrifying buildings would need to happen to meet a goal like that. And there are quite a bit of incentives and new incentives even coming out relatively soon, as well as the federal monies that are coming through the IRA that are helping to offset some of the incremental cost of going to heat pumps, for example, for space heating and water heating. And but really, this natural gas will become, once electricity is taken care of, natural gas will become your biggest emissions source from an energy perspective. And really addressing that with envelope opportunities too, building envelope with insulation and windows has byproducts of really just improving the comfort of homes and air quality inside a home or inside a business too. So that's one other thing to consider, is what does community engagement look like to understand where the community should head next.
A question about that aspect, and if someone can speak to this who was there when the goals were made, but how much of the community was engaged in the original goal setting, and how much of that was taken into account when we set those goals? Because it seems, at least from the feedback we've gotten so far, is that the interest is there in getting renewable energy, both residential and in businesses. It's more the opportunity / money to execute that.
Leah, I can speak to that. The goal itself started from a climate reality training in Denver with Al Gore in 2017. And there was a handful of Nederland residents, and there was a breakout group, about 100% commitments. And so we had Sierra Club and Climate Reality support. We also had Boulder County support. We had a handful of local residents. We started Climate Together NED, which was a whole separate group. We brought it to the SAB board, and SAB was immediately on board. And then some of the members from Climate Together NED joined SAB, myself and Jennifer Morse. And we did some community intentional mapping that kind of came from the Sierra Club training that we did after the climate reality training. But I would say there was no focus groups, there was no like structure, we had no consultant support, like it was very much grassroots. We had the BOT room full when we came and presented it, and Chris can probably speak to it from that side of things. We had Leslie Glostrom there, who skipped a meeting in Boulder to come up and be in Nederland to support us. So I personally felt like there was a really extensive network and web that was created over a few months to really get us to commit. We were the 42nd community in the country at that time to commit to something like this. Now there's, hundreds. So, but Chris, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too. We had lots of conversations.
Yeah, it was definitely a grassroots thing. Like Erica said, it kind of grew out of the Climate Reality Project, and the timing worked along with the town signing the Paris Climate Accords in 2017. So we signed those, and we're kind of looking for something to do, instead of just a feel good, hey, we signed these, what can be a target goal? And that's when Erica and the Climate Reality groups came forward with this. And like you said, there was a packed room, really good grassroots support that pushed us into this, and then tried to really accelerate the process kind of as an aspirational goal, like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to figure out how to do it.
But just to reiterate, Chris, and not to feed a dead horse, we did propose 2030, because that was kind of the general consensus at the time.
Absolutely,
for commitments like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final moment, Chris was like, yes, and let's cut 5 years.
Yep, we wanted to push things a little harder than we'd hoped, than was maybe wise at the time. But we were trying to move the needle. Yeah, we definitely, the royal we here, I definitely pushed hard on, kind of threw us under that, goal on us, put that goal on us. How about that? And yeah, in retrospect, if we'd known what we were facing coming down the line, we probably shouldn't have. But I still think, it's a good goal to try and get, to push in the next year and a half to get businesses on, to get more community members on, knowing that even if we sign up dozens of people on some of these programs we're looking at, those recs, it's not going to show up in this analysis from Excel, because Excel is using this rec-based model. And Excel has their own reasons and goals as a public or publicly traded company with shareholders for pushing that. But, going back to the goal of this was to bring the community around to try and get as many people to sign themselves away from fossil fuels, away from these natural gas coal plants that have to be kept running for another 50 years to remain profitable. And whether or not where that gets counted was kind of a secondary consideration.
Also wanted to add, and thanks Erica for this information earlier, when the goal was set, as I understand it, it was just the town boundary, and this gap analysis includes the library district. So there's a little discrepancy there. It's not huge, but just to add some context.
Thanks for that, Leah. Terry, I have a question for you. So early on, we had talked about just purchasing recs. And before we even committed to like what our rec perspective was going to be and our goal and what 100% would mean. And I would love to get an idea of what recs would cost annually if Nederland did decide to do that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can certainly follow up with some numbers there. I was looking into this previously, and I want to say that some of the programs that Xcel Energy offers actually is a little bit cheaper than how you can find them on the marketplace. So just something to keep in mind. But I can certainly follow up there. Well, I want to keep this discussion going and maybe with a little bit more guided questions in terms of priorities for the town and priorities from a community's perspective too. Heard a little bit about, from a community's perspective, there's interest there in trying to get to 100% electricity, renewable electricity, and really it could be a cost barrier at this point to get there. But curious if there are other priorities from the broader community that we haven't touched on yet tonight that should be considered too. It sounds like really that's the biggest thing to consider at this point. But Erica, I see your hand raised.
Oh, I think it was a hangover. Yeah, I think it was a hangover. But
no worries.
Terry, everything I've seen is like expectations of about 30% more electricity use when everything is fully electrified. I also just want to throw out that can of worms because, as we increase our electrification of our built environment, that's going to increase the amount that we need to offset as well. So it would be interesting to set a timeline as far as this goal and not just have it like rolling like it has been and say, okay, we want to offset energy use from 2017 for the town of Nederland. And maybe that will be more tangible and then look towards other goals. I don't know if there's an appetite for that, but I do know that 30% is kind of what I've heard. I don't know what your all's consensus is on that as far as an expectation.
Yeah, I think depending on how much electric baseboard there is right now, it might be higher than that. I think on the Front Range, we've seen even as high as almost double the community's electricity use when going to 100% electricity for space heating and water heating and cooking and other things like that. Really doubles electricity use, but I think really just depends on kind of where Nederland is today in terms of who's got what. types of equipment.
And does that include an increase in electric vehicles being charged at home? Is that accounted in the estimate?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
It turns out to be a smaller piece of the puzzle in terms of overall electricity use,
Okay.
but certainly something to consider.
Hi, this is Nicole. So one of the things that potentially we can do to assess the community's appetite for what other priorities or what other goals there might be. Miranda, we're about ready to go into our comprehensive plan. We're going through that update, and perhaps we can roll in what you think about rolling in some asking the consultants to also just touch specifically on this topic and as a part of their outreach to assess community priorities.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't make the ask. My only hesitation is when looking at some of these RFPs, they're feeling like financially we're asking a lot for not a lot of money, even though it is a lot of money. And so that would be, I think we'd have to have the consultants really assess the feasibility of that.
I mean, if they're already doing some of the outreach, right, they have to ask about some of these things anyway. Sustainability has always been a huge part of this at least the previous comprehensive plans.
Yeah.
It seems like this would be a nice alignment and something that we should push for.
I agree.
Okay. So, so I'd say that to the board is, potentially rather than putting out like our own survey or whatnot from SAB, that we roll this into the bigger conversation of things that it's going to happen with the comprehensive plan. And then that way it also gets documented in terms of, hey, this is what the community has voiced, and it gets, in the comprehensive plan, and then therefore we can enact on it from there. Would just be something I throw out there.
Good points. From the town's perspective, I'm curious, has any sort of interest changed since 2017, since the original goal was set for 100% electricity in terms of priorities? Hearing more of an interest in kind of pushing for a rec-based approach. But other thoughts there?
I guess I would have to hear from other folks, but have we asked the community from that perspective? I don't know if there were any surveys or outreach that was done after 2017.
I guess I would
Sounds
say
like
we sort of had an informal survey where we put out that community solar garden initiative, which would have allowed people to really almost have 100% solar net for their house with that the community solar garden. There were some issues with it, but I think that the response from people here was pretty underwhelming, which to me indicates sort of a lack of excitement to actually take even a minimal effort on a personal basis to accomplish the goal.
Is there any, for that effort, was there any like follow-up to understand why people weren't participating, maybe getting to this barriers idea?
I think a lot of people had issues with the website sign up. It was sort of convoluted. You couldn't actually sign up on the web. You sort of filled in information on the web, and then you had to have a phone call with somebody. I think some other people didn't like the idea that you would essentially get 2 electric bills, one of which was charged to a credit card. And so I think there were some issues with the way these programs are carried out because it's not Excel generating the power. But I also just think that it's really hard to sell people on that. Because like if I wasn't involved in it, I wouldn't have even really looked at the pamphlets or the ads in the paper or anything like that because it looked like someone was trying to sell me something. So I
Yeah.
think there were a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah, I'm going to second that. The process was complicated. It getting two bills and having a credit instead of just a simple process of doing the accounting, I think turned a lot of people off. And even though we have identified a new community solar provider, which is much easier, the idea of the community solar is sort of difficult for a lot of people to understand because it's not very clear in how it works. Yeah, so everything Rich just said, and maybe that will improve over time, but if they're not getting that direct renewable energy and it's just like, oh, you'll save a tiny bit of money and do something good for renewable energy, it's not a great selling point.
Yeah, I think that was something I was going to point out. I think they said it was like a 5% savings. Was that right, Rich and Leah?
That was the original, and the
Yeah.
new supplier is up to 10%, but that's still not, that's still not it's not promising 10%, and it's up to.
Oh, it's up to. Yeah. And so I think,
Slightly.
it's like getting, if you're not, I think, hardcore, like all the people here on this call, like, we're going to do it just because we're going to do it, right? It's in our DNA. It's just, we're motivated for the sake that, it's going solar. But, to convince other folks in the population where it is just maybe a nominal savings of 5%, it's hard to get folks to do the thing, and especially when the thing was a lot of things and it wasn't very clear, and the website was a bit wonky. So I think making folks do that behavior was a challenge.
Thinking about whichever goal or approach we want to be taking in the future, I'm curious how the town would position itself in terms of taking a role to help the community at large and really itself to meet that goal. I'm curious how the town might provide support.
I'll offer, well, and then, Miranda here pop in. So we just set our strategic goals and through December of 2024. And, for the town, those goals are really for us to kind of just focus, like, hey, this is what's really important for us to be able to knock down, and to get out of the what happens very frequently with, I think, boards is, oh, there's a squirrel, let's go, it's like, keep you focused and not get so distracted by some of the other things that pop up. And so I would argue that when we go through this next, process, because we've made the agreement that we'll go through this every year, that if there's a plan in place, and then if there is a very specific goal in mind that we feel like is attainable, right? That it's specific, it's measurable, it's all the things in a SMART goal, then I would suggest that that comes before the BOT, and it gets put into that strategic goals, so that it is identified, and it could potentially even have funding behind it, or at least it's zeroed in and focused on, so that we can at least find the funding potentially for it. But Miranda, don't know if you had anything else to add to that.
No, I agree. Nope, nothing else.
I think the only thing I'll add is that there is the Boulder County Sustainability Matching Grant that we have used to help pay for our sustainability coordinator for several years. And when we can get to a point where we can roll that sustainability coordinator salary into the town budget instead of supplementing it with that grant, that gives us $15,000 every year of funding that we can use towards projects like this to save up for 3 years, and then we have 45K for a solar garden or something. I'm sure Boulder County would work with us on different things if that was, like you said, Nicole, a clearly defined goal and way that we could go about it. But we need to be able to open up that funding first, because that's really where our sustainability funding is coming from.
Okay, well, I want to, I guess, take the temperature of the room a little bit and see if folks are leaning one way or the other in terms of an approach that the town should take. So maybe either through discussion or if folks want to drop a 1, 2, or a 3 in the chat. I'm curious if we have a little bit of consensus on where the next steps are, or if we're leaning in multiple directions. I'll just open it up to the group.
This is Melody. I am at 1, and then in 2025, if we need to adjust our timeline, then we adjust our timeline. I do want to bring up what I put in the chat earlier, which is we had a pretty large discussion about this over several meetings when we were setting our goals as the SAB, which was to really push for the current goal. And at the time, we were still trying to work with US Solar to get people signed up for this solar garden. And I know that didn't pan out the way we had hoped. I don't see I just don't see a good way to go to the public and say, hey, we actually don't like our goal, help us set a different one, and have that not come off in a bad way. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but I would still like to push for the current goal, adjust us if we need to do so in 2025 when we hit that mark, and really just see what we can do, because having that pressure of 2 years often can get things done that you didn't realize could even get done. But that's just where I'm at.
Thanks, that's helpful. Yeah, and if nothing else, it sets you up for a longer term goal, right? So just to recognize lots of folks putting things in the chat. About three folks are interested in both adjusting the timeline, but also kind of taking the community's temperature and understanding what their priorities are. But since you've spoken about it, Melody, the current goal is getting more and more votes too. So I think folks are resonating with what you said, Melody. Who, after kind of understanding the approach that the town wants to take, I'm curious that, you know, who needs to be involved in making the decision, I guess, you know, whether it's to keep the current goal or to shift.
And I want to make a note about the shifting as well. I think I'm definitely in agreement that I would love to have some more sustainability directed questions as we're outreaching to town in this other process that we're going through. That makes a ton of sense, regardless of whatever our goal is here after talking about this. But I do want to bring up to the rest of SAB that when we went through our goals discussion as well, we did broach this subject of gas. And there was a lot of good points brought up about why we were not ready to tackle that subject yet. So if we are going to shift community priorities, I don't want it to be focused towards eliminating natural gas. And I will probably fight that continually, just because there's a lot of issues. I mean, my power just went out 2 days ago, And in this house here, I don't have a wood stove. So the fact that I had gas meant that I could eat. And if I didn't have gas, I wasn't going to be able to eat. So there's some serious considerations when we go to tackling that question beyond just adding electricity to the grid. But those were the two main points that we talked about when we talked about a natural gas goal and why we didn't really want to push for one quite yet.
Yeah, I think the align with the community priorities is kind of getting all the things on the table. And, like you said, Melody is just, irregardless of this conversation, we need to be asking those questions. And, it could be that it comes out of that, the community really wants us to fight for perhaps having our own, community solar garden somewhere here in town or whatnot, whatever it might be, right? But I think that aligning with the community priorities is almost something that is going to happen irregardless, just because we've got the comp plan coming up. And again, it's like all the things get on the table just to assess the temperature of the community.
Melody, to speak to what you just said about natural gas, Boulder County is working on a draft decarbonization plan, and much of it is coming from Longmont and Denver. Leah is familiar with it, and I think you'll also very much enjoy reading it. But I think it's on everyone's minds that it's not equitable to decarbonize the mountain communities because we don't have that resiliency component. We are on the edges of the grid, and we do have a lot more power outages. So absolutely hear you there. And then, I hear you guys in this community solar garden, and I may just be, missing some things. But we've looked at it for years. We looked at it first in 2017. It was our number one priority to reach our goal and to do so quickly. And there just is not great space, nor is it competitive to actually have a garden up in Nederland compared with the bidding process. And I'm sure Terry and the other Excel folks, the Pi partners, can speak to that. But I just would not put all my eggs in that basket because I've been looking at it for over 5 years.
The new community solar program is not a garden based in the Nederland area, just to clarify that. So that's getting it through the grid, but not locally sourced, which again is not the ideal solution.
But similar to a setup like we have with Oakleaf, where they're somewhere else, we're buying their electricity. There's not magically a way to wire that electricity directly to our buildings, but we are paying for that electricity to be on the grid.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and a locally sourced community solar garden, I wish there was a good option, but just gone circles and circles around that. The other thing I would just throw out there is, why can't we keep this goal and add other goals? And I also appreciate the community feedback perspective, and maybe things have changed, but it was very infrequent to have folks at our SAB meetings in the past. The community greenhouse was extremely controversial, but nobody showed up for years while it was on the agenda over and over and over again. We've done focus groups around the EV action plan. That was great, but it had to be targeted folks that were, at the school working, or specific businesses. I'm hearing folks wanting to scrap the 2025 and go for new goals. And I just would hesitate. And why can't we just add on to what we already have? The 2025 goal has made Nederland a pioneer in this space. And I'm concerned that if it's scrapped, what does that say?
I want to speak one more aspect of why I think we should keep the current goal with, always bringing more of the community into the process, and, getting their priorities, their understanding of what we're trying to do, and trying to get their input where they're willing to give it. But, the reason why we pursued this in 2017, 2018, why Erica and the the climate reality folks came to us with this goal, and then and then I pushed it to 2025. Is in 2017, 2018, it was clear that the climate crisis was a crisis. It was clear that we needed to do something, and we were running out of time. Here we are, 5 years on, and we're falling further behind. The crisis is even more extreme now. So this is not the time to be, saying, oh, we're going to push the goal out because it's going to make us look better if we do it in 2030, then, fall a little short in 2025. Now is the time to be taking even more extreme steps and pushing our community to move in this direction, pushing, no offense, Excel, but pushing Excel Energy to decarbonize, because the crisis is significant and we are on the front lines of who's going to be damaged by this. We've seen it in Superior with the fires there. We saw it in Maui. We all know that it's coming for us at some point, and it's just simply, fortunate at this point that we haven't burned because of the climate crisis.
I'd like to change my vote back to number 1, keep the current goal. And I wonder if it's worth continuing this discussion in the next SAB meeting, just for the sake of time, since we do have other agenda items, and to be respectful of Pi's time as well. I know we've gone well over the time that we allotted. What does everyone think about continuing this and making a decision in the next meeting?
Thanks, Leah. I think that's good because we do only have 4 SAB members here right now. And so I think it's good to have a discussion with our other members present as well. So yeah. How about others? Anybody object to that, let's say?
I don't object.
Abby, Terry, and Tammy, thank you so much for all of this work and information. It's been really valuable.
Of course. And let's chime in that, we proposed 3 options today, but you don't have to stay with in your 3 lanes. So it was coming up in conversation. If the answer is keep the current goal, but get some outreach to understand the barriers so that you can accelerate what happens between now and 2025, I think that's a great option, which kind of seemed like where the discussion was headed. And I couldn't figure out how to see the chat. So apologies if there are other comments that I just was totally missing. But I'll end on that note for as food for thought for your next discussion.
Took me a while too, Abby. Lower right-hand corner. Yeah, thank you for letting us be a part of this. Even in that next discussion, if we talk about some priorities and everything, I'm intrigued as we look at beneficial electrification and weatherization, some of the things going on within the utility and where we might be able to bring some of our new offerings to kind of help focus on where the community wants to go.
And likewise, I just appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion with the town. So look forward to follow-up conversations.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Good night.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
All right. So we will continue to discuss this at the September meeting. Any final thoughts? All right. Moving on to sustainability and town operations. Because we went over on the last one, what I'm thinking is to all the SAB members have some homework to just think about what are different pieces of operations that they might have questions about, how are things running, etc. And then send it to me and I can kind of compile it all into main topics that we want to discuss at the next meeting so that those department heads can have a little bit of heads up too about what they might be looking at. How does everybody feel about that?
Well, we have, Andrew, were you here specifically for this topic?
Yeah, so just really quick while Andrew gets, is Mark and Nikki are sick, so they can't be here. But when I was
Okay.
chatting with Leah, the thought was like, well, Andrew, has, with the utilities facilities, it would be good to have Andrew here. So that is why we have Andrew. I guess I would argue if we're going to have a department head conversation, do it when all the department heads are here.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, Andrew, if you were only here for the one topic. Because can he not? Is he having trouble?
I'm wondering if maybe he lost. It's a little dicey over here, and I believe he's at work still. So he might have
Okay.
lost.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean
the thunder over me in town right now is making everything glitchy. So.
Yeah.
yeah. You guys keep kind of going in and out like voices do, so okay. But yeah, that makes sense if we just want to wait for all the department heads. And I guess you can text Andrew and tell him he doesn't have to be on anymore.
Okay.
Anyone else have an opinion on that?
Yeah, Melody, I think it would be helpful for the kind of when I was like, hey, staff wants to talk to you about, and how they can best support. I think it would be good to give them some sort of idea of what's on your mind because they weren't really sure how to best prepare.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. If every SAB member can just send me some of the main things they're thinking about when it comes to that. I know for me, because I order a bunch of office supplies for my job, that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about. I thought at one point town had a sustainable purchasing policy, but I'm not sure exactly what it was or what it covered. And I know we are doing things like recycled paper for the water bills or something like that. But so that's kind of where my head's at. So I'm thinking each one of us might have a different idea about those kinds of things. And then if you want to send that to me, I'll just kind of compile it all so that the department heads can kind of prepare. So I will remind you all in a few weeks if I haven't gotten that from you. So we can move on to our third discussion item, which is the Masters of the Environment capstone program is coming back around and opening up. So I wanted to have just a brainstorming session about what kind of projects we're thinking we might want to propose for that. And Leah, I don't know if you have any ideas or input that you want to start us off with, or.
Well, the one thought is that our previous proposal was an electrification roadmap and it was not selected, and we weren't able to get any feedback on why we were not selected, but I wonder if we not choose that topic is my only thought. Oh, actually, and also I know that we were looking at a climate action plan and possibly allotting some funding for that, but if that might fit into a capstone project, I know that's an area where we were hoping to get some more support.
Yeah, I think my personal understanding of kind of the electrification roadmap and maybe why it didn't take off so well is it is a large, daunting project. And for that matter, of course, the 100% renewable energy project was a large, daunting project, but I think we heard from the program director and some of the capstone students that did the project that was really a lot more work than a lot of these other kind of projects are. It was kind of in a different league, if you could say. And so I'm wondering if we really focused on a more concrete, direction for them in some way, and a project that is a little easier to tackle, a little easier to wrap your brain around, that it might get picked up better, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have any input, Erica. I'd love to hear it.
To be honest, Melody, I'm looking up the climate resiliency grant from DOLA, and they actually will fund climate action plans with a 10% local match. And that seems like a great opportunity for Netherlands, and maybe even pairing that with the MENB program.
Yeah,
so
I
you
mean,
have
if
the
we had money
funding.
to pay the students, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
We were looking into that grant, and trying to remember why we couldn't go for it. I think it was the match aspect that we needed to build that into the next budget cycle. Miranda, do you recall exactly why we were not pursuing that? Oh, we needed, BOT approval, and we wouldn't get that before the deadline, at least for this grant cycle.
Right.
gotcha.
So we're
Yeah,
watching for the next round to open up.
yeah. Back to like the MENB projects. It's tough, Melody. Was the electrification not picked because we didn't have a video? I think that was due like early January, or was a video submitted?
I submitted a video. Larry and I recorded it. Well, it was really just me. Larry recorded me. But we did do a video. I think, like I said, we didn't really, I mean, it's such a broad topic, like help us figure out what are our barriers and challenges to getting to 100%, electrification, and what approaches could we go to do that with. And we gave the 100% renewable project as kind of a template of like, hey, you could do something similar here, where you just kind of analyze our different opportunities, make a rubric, and we can kind of go from there. And it seemed like the other projects were much more, at the end of the semester, you saw the impact that you had over that semester, whereas something like a plan, you're not going to see that impact for 20 years.
And was there funding committed, Melody?
No.
So I know Miles told me that I think 70% of the projects were funded, which is interesting because
Yep.
could also look at some other programs. Like I think the University of Denver, they don't allow anyone to get paid for their capstone projects. So there might be some options if the funding is the challenge, and that's kind of why they didn't take that project. I'm working with someone that just graduated, and it sounds like the funding piece is a really big hardship for them if they don't have funding. So that may have been it on its own. PI has been helping some communities with a beneficial electrification, or built environment electrification roadmap. I think they just have helped Superior with one. So that may be something to, like, if you really want that project, you could look at some other resources. But as far as the MEND program, yeah, I mean, it's tough because you have to flesh out a application, right? And if you do multiple proposals, you've got to do full applications for each of those. But it might be worth bringing a handful of ideas to Miles and just brainstorm with him. I mean, he was excited about the project proposal last year, but he
Yeah.
might be able to give some more feedback.
Yeah, and all the students I met with too thought it was a really interesting idea. They were intrigued by it. They thought it would give them kind of freedom to do what they wanted to do and kind of prioritize, where they were headed personally. And so I'm not, 100% sure why nothing worked out, because there was some good feedback about it. But I know payment was definitely part of it, I'm sure. Any other SAB members have any ideas or thoughts about a capstone project?
Melody, is there anything on the current goals that we could direct back to and get some support there?
If my computer will work to bring it up. um, adopt more solar friendly town code. I don't know if there's any Masters of the Environment students that might be interested in looking at something like that. And then the plastic ban, you know, coming down is another big thing. How do we best kind of roll that out and deal with that impact and support businesses as they transition? Those are our 1 and 2 goals there.
Melody, this is, you know, something to think about is you could roll the solar friendly code into the 2024 IECC. I don't know what the climate is in Netherlands. Miranda, I'm sure you can speak better, but I know the code is kind of one of the biggest bang for your buck as far as efficiency. And so you could potentially present to a group about helping Netherlands adopt 2024 IECC that would help that solar code, as well as help this energy efficiency and like the electrification of the built environment as well. And that's going to be launching, you know, pretty soon here, and that would be pretty aggressive for Netherlands to adopt it that quickly, but not crazy.
You know, there was talk. I guess that's the question really before the Board of Trustees is like, is it the full code? Do we go and adopt all 2024 codes, or is it just the one? I know building officials always say if you're gonna move up on one, move up on all. And obviously we did just change all the codes. You know, that's something for SAB, I guess, to decide is like, do you want to just recommend looking at energy code, or direct staff to take a look at the benefits of kind of all or one? It does get confusing when you end up with different building codes on different years.
I think, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, I think that was in regards to what do we need to do to reach the gold or platinum level Soul Smart designation and really be solar friendly in our town code and not necessarily change all of town code.
So I was under the and Leah would know way more than I do. So, but I was under the impression that we just needed to update solar code, not necessarily adopt 2024 international energy code.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And I think Erica was saying that we might look at adopting that higher code instead because a lot of that is in there already.
So we did just, and Leah, I just realized in this conversation we probably haven't followed back up with Courtney about our new solar code, because if I were right, Leah, we were waiting for it to actually show up in the municipal code itself. Is
Yes,
that right?
I think that's
okay.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay, yeah, and that's not codified yet. We just approved the supplemental so it can be codified. But that's where I wonder.
That's for the changes we made to get the silver level designation that we have, right?
Yeah, so you're saying to get to gold, we then need to adopt building code potentially?
I would have to look back at Cynthia's notes, but there were several things that we needed to do to be able to get to that gold level.
Okay.
Miranda, I don't know exactly what 2024 has. I'd have to look back at some of there was a code cohort recently, and they like synthesized kind of all of the next 2024, 2027 to 2030, and what that looks like as far as EV ready, solar ready, gas, or all electric. But my guess would be that that would be pretty aggressive as far as moving towards the Soul Smart. But I'm
Okay.
not familiar with the platinum since that's so new.
Got it.
So the other idea to throw out there, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm hijacking your all's meeting, is potentially presenting a project to find some type of permanent sustainability funding source or revenue stream for the town of Nederland, separate from the general fund. And I don't know if there would be an appetite for that, but I know we've talked about it a few times as far as like a real estate exchange tax. I know that's not necessarily possible, but if there's a way, you know, like many other cities have a separate funding source, and then it allows them to fund a lot of cool projects and then give sustainability that kind of permanent financial source.
Erica, do you know off the top of your head if any of those communities that have those funding sources are statutory towns? Yes, Erie's a statutory town still, right?
Yeah, hopefully home rule soon is kind of the
Okay.
consensus.
Does Erie have a sustainable funding? Because I just know statutory can be a limitation in many ways.
Yeah, we don't know, but I know it's been really successful for Vail, as we've talked about before, and it funds kind of their entire environmental program. You got real estate exchange tax. Yeah, it gets tricky with options, right, Miranda? But it could be an interesting project to present to a group of students.
But this is, sorry, much larger scale conversation, but I know some board members are kind of wanting to maybe start to talk about and explore home rule because there are such funding limitations for statutory communities where like home rules can have like true lodging taxes and all sorts of other funding mechanisms. I would just be curious. I don't know if there's a list somewhere, Erica. Be curious to research other statutory towns that have alternative funding. Because yes, one of the Board of Trustees goals is to look at alternative revenue sources. So I would say as a town staff, very interested in supporting SAB if you all are and looking into what Erica's referring to here.
Yeah, and a caveat to that in terms of, you know, growing those revenue structures is, you know, there's a bit of tax fatigue on the constituents and whatnot. We do have to assess fees, you know, just like our parks and rec fees and everything, just because, you know, earlier evidence showed that we were way under feeing, I guess, some of those things. But, you know, some of those creative ideas, very much welcome. We want to kind of put everything on the table in terms of what those revenue streams can be, so that, you know, not just like a sustainability coordinator, but just all the other things that, you know, we want to do in the future. Very happy to hear any of those ideas.
You know, one of the things that's on the table right now is that bag tax. And I know you all decided to kind of wait for that, but it is a revenue source. And it's going to and hopefully be temporary, right? But with the paper bags continuing in 2024 and beyond, it you know that is an option for sure.
Do we have any type of understanding of just, I guess, how much that would generate? Have you seen any studies or anything, any analyses around that?
There were some statistics that I don't have in front of me right now about how much some larger cities have collected, but for reference, I believe it's a 10-cent bag fee, and the town remits, I believe, 40%. It's either 40 or 60% per fee. So if in here, you know, a lot of residents have their own bags. It's mostly tourists that would be paying the fee, if I understand correctly. So yeah, I don't know the math on how much that would be, but I don't know that it's a huge source of revenue.
Well, so
But
I've
yeah.
just been doing a lot of research on this. I'm like rubbing you can't see me, I'm rubbing my eyes right now because it's like, my head hurts. Um, but it's 60% to the municipality, 40% to the business. And my understanding is that from the state legislation, all businesses have to be charging this 10-cent fee minimum. So some towns have a higher bag fee. I think Louisville is 25 cents. And so right now, the businesses in Netherlands should be collecting this fee. And if you're not requesting it from them, then they can use that for increasing waste diversion and supporting recyclable bags and some other things for their business. But that's something that is on the municipality to enforce. And I don't know how much it would be. You know, Netherlands had a bag fee since 2015. And I know there's some businesses like Smoker Friendly, right, that have continued to pay as they're supposed to. But I think that that is an interesting conversation to start because it could start funding some of these, like an MEND program and paying for students. You know, it's going to have some type of benefit, and yes, it's going to hurt residents a bit, but they're already paying for it. So or they should be paying for it according to the state legislation. They're just not necessarily making it to the town.
So I know, and just a reminder to kind of the SAB group, it fell off our radar a little bit, but the direction that was given to staff was to work on updating our current bag fee ordinance to ensure that we are mirroring full compliance with state statute. And so Leah and I just talked about that last week about the need to get that back on track. But I think if I recall correctly, the feeling was we wouldn't enforce it until January 1st, having enough time to notify businesses of like, hey, yes, this has always been in our ordinance, but now we're actually going to enforce it, and you'll need to remit, and here's how you'll do that.
And that
Yeah,
will coincide with the styrofoam ban, which is also in effect January 2024. And as I understand it, the statewide plastic bag ban, the state's not enforcing it. It's up to communities to determine what that means per community. And technically, under the state ordinance, most of our small businesses are exempt from the state ban, but it's up to us to have that clear in the ordinance that we're enforcing it regardless, or how we're enforcing it. Or encouraging maybe is a nicer way to say.
I think that's correct, Miranda, that's the direction. I guess what I just might note is that now that we're in, you know, a late August here, have we reached out to the businesses that are not currently collecting 10% and said, hey, we're aware you're not currently collecting 10%. Just a reminder, as of January 1st, we will start to enforce this.
So Larry was a part of that original group, and so I think kind of fell off in terms of that outreach. You know, of course, I think I always would like to have at least a code in hand. Yes, we have it, but it doesn't match current statute. So I'd like to kind of hustle, get that code in place, and then say, hey, this is coming. Happy to do it the other way around if you'd rather us just reach out and say, hey, we're working on this. I just think it's a little bit stronger of a message if we say, hey, here's the ordinance, and in 90 days from now, you're going to need to comply, and we're here to support you with that.
Yeah, do we have fines in there for non-compliance?
I don't know if we currently do, but even if we did, we couldn't enforce them because I'm pretty sure they're not on our fee schedule.
Yeah, that's
There-
that's what I was thinking. So that needs to be a part of the process of getting
Right.
it codified, is also adding that to the fee schedule for 20.
And that can be added as we go into the 2024 budget.
Yeah.
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 So,
There are some examples from other communities who have enforced this already, and they do have penalty structures set up. They have to self-audit. The town audits, right, these businesses, but I think Miranda and I need to comb through all of that later and figure out what would work for our town.
Right. And then the other note I was gonna make is that BNF still asked me if I want to donate my 10-cent bank credit. So I'm wondering if either them or the elementary school that they donated it to would be willing to share what that amount is, to kind of give us a gauge of what might be in the fund. Of course, it's going to be more than just BNF, but I think they're the biggest, probably, contributor to what that's going to look like.
Good idea.
So, rolling back around to the Masters of the Environment project. Do you see a room, Leah, where a capstone group could help with that, or not?
Sorry, was that directed at me? The audio cut out.
Yes, sorry. As far as like the plastic ban goes.
Oh, I don't know that that would be the best use of the capstone project, since
Okay.
we have a lot of guidance on that already, and that's coming so quickly, right? We would have that in place. I don't know that the capstone would be done before we would roll that out. And I want to add too, there is an information session for this capstone next Friday. So I wonder if it's worth waiting to get more information from them on what they're looking for before we decide on a topic.
I think it's possible that they'll have, a little bit of new information, but having attended the information sessions the last couple of years, I mean, really, it's just more about what you can expect from the students and like what their commitments are to the program, what they're going to develop. It's a lot more kind of the nuts and bolts of how the program works, not necessarily these are the projects our students are looking for. And I know as a group, we've always had a hard time kind of narrowing down on what do we want our project to be. And we have to submit a project to them. We can't just say, oh, here's 5 projects and the students can pick one of the 5. We kind of have to pick that one ourselves that we want to present to them.
Okay. And for reference, the proposal is due October 27th.
Yes. So we have some time for sure to continue talking about it. But so I'll go through some of our goals here on our sheet. Like I said, working on what we need to do to update code to maybe reach a higher level Soul Smart designation. I'm not sure how much of that Cynthia already had kind of developed, or if we need some sort of plan to do that, but I also don't think that would be a huge project. Like we were talking about, some sort of solar subscription is definitely a huge thing. Transitioning to EVs, I feel like we've got some movement on that right now, so I'm not sure if there's any other place in there that would make sense for a capstone project. And then the big two things are what we already talked about, which is reduce or write and pass a climate action plan and develop a baseline study and a plan for electrification. And maybe we just narrow that down instead of a plan for electrification. Maybe it's just get the baseline study done and identify some barriers and make that project just a little smaller. Reinforced infill as a town priority and policy. That's more of a small policy thing. Increased participation in energy efficiency programs. Yeah. Maybe it's worthwhile asking Miles about like a community outreach type of project where maybe they're not necessarily completing a project as much as outreaching to the community about what programs are available to them, whether that's energy efficiency or whether that's solar or participation in SAB or whatever. Because I'm just not sure what the final product would be in that sort of project. If anybody else has thoughts, please unmute and chime in.
Yeah, we'll kind of give it some more thought. Yeah, I need some more time to process it.
All right. Hearing no other thoughts, we will put this on the September agenda as well. So we can continue thinking about that. And so I will just remind everybody our one action item is to talk about community choice energy, community choice aggregation. And if we don't make action tonight, that's fine too. I just put it on there in case we did want to. And so I wanted to talk about minutes 2, which is not on the agenda. And so it's getting late, so we can probably move that to the next meeting too. So really we've got updates left and then a discussion about community choice energy. So let's move into updates. Any subcommittee updates from anyone? Leah, how's the zero waste subcommittee doing?
Yes, we're mostly working on the styrofoam ban and strategizing about the plastic bag ban and fee and how to enforce that. And we received word that plastic, black plastic is going to the landfill now. It's typically the bottom of to-go containers with the clear lids, mushroom containers that you get in the grocery store, and black flower pots. And those have been going to the landfill for a while, but our cab and I think it's EcoCycle decided not to put out a public notice about that. They were going to enforce that and start not accepting those items. So I'm not sure really where we are with that now. They may enforce that in the near future. There's a toxicity concern and it's not recyclable, but for now we're going to keep taking it. So there could be some changes coming there. We are confirmed getting our in-vessel composter installed by the end of this year, confirmed by Boulder County. And then we are getting that LED sign soon too. That's been ordered and should be showing up soon. So we will work with the Zero Waste Subcommittee and the transfer station to put messaging out as appropriate. So that's the Zero Waste update. As far as the Energy Subcommittee, we weren't able to meet this last time, but just a reminder, we have our electric vehicle ride and drive event next month, September 17th, which is a farmer's market Sunday. And we do have our community solar garden, the new supplier, up and running, and Peter is working on outreach and getting that on our website. And then one update that's not mentioned in my update that's attached here is that the Solar United Neighbors Rooftop Solar Campaign is relaunching. They have a soft or a formal launch in Lafayette on September 18th, and they were asking for an elected official from our community to attend. I'm not sure exactly what they mean. It was asking for some clarification on the appropriate person. And Erica, maybe you attended that last meeting and know more about that, but I should have some guidance more about who we might be able to send to that event. If no one is able to attend that, there is a Boulder launch event October 18th that I plan to attend. And if you recall, this was postponed because Xcel was passing the cost of infrastructure upgrades onto residents. And so we had paused that while we figure out how to get around that. It seems that Xcel will be attending one of those launch events to answer questions publicly. And there's some guidance around how to speak to the program and advise residents on that. So more to come there, but we are moving forward with the launch September 18th. I'm running through my updates real fast. I think that's...
Leah, I can just add that I think they were just suggesting elected officials. So if somebody from the Board of Trustees wants to attend, and then just let Zach know with the county how they want to attend, if they want to speak and when they want to speak or what they want to speak about. So that was kind of the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't in that last meeting. Okay, I think that'll do it for my updates, and you can read my full update if you'd like more, but we should probably move on to community choice energy. So
real quick, just want to check in with Rich and Nicole on the where we are on the Guardians of Nature reworking.
So I'm not sure they'll be able to provide that update. So it's Mayor Billy worked on it with Attorney Madsen. It's now sitting with Attorney Ladd for review. And then once that's done, it'll go to Alan and Rich for their review and then come to SAB.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so community choice energy.
Great. Yeah, so this is essentially the third formal push in terms of legislation towards community choice energy options in the state of Colorado. I don't know if anyone got a chance to read the documents that were provided, but it's essentially allowing for more choice as a community to decide where the wholesale supply of energy is coming from. So the delivery and maintenance through infrastructure would still be maintained by Xcel or Black Hills. It's more providing the opportunity for a community, in this case, probably Boulder County. It could also involve Gilpin County or neighboring counties to choose, say, if we want more renewable energy as the source of our energy, or more locally produced energy, for example. It doesn't guarantee that we wouldn't still get our energy from fossil fuels, but the existence of competition is what opens up the opportunity to increase renewable energy. And Excel, would lose customers essentially through this model. The CCE essentially pays an exit fee to kind of make them whole through the loss of customers. But there's a lot still unknown in terms of what the legislation would look like. The CC4CA, I think that's Colorado Communities for Climate Action, is pretty supportive with the caveat of wanting to see what the guardrails are in terms of that legislation. But in 2021, Nederland, Denver, Boulder, Lafayette, Pueblo, I think there were a couple other communities, did formally support this measure, the legislation that came out in 2021. So we would just be continuing the support of that. There is a template that was provided that we could use to formally provide our continued support as a community for this to potentially be an option in Colorado. And I want to be clear too, it's not deregulating the utility. It's not a retail energy option either. It's still through the POCs. They still regulate that and kind of monitor that relationship, but it is a not-for-profit entity. So unlike Xcel Energy, which is answering to shareholders and is profit-driven, this would allow for more competition. Say if a renewable energy is less expensive, that would be an option where Xcel wouldn't necessarily go for that option because it cuts into their profits. So there's a lot more to that, but I'll just stop there and see if there are any questions or concerns about the idea.
This is Rich. I wouldn't agree that we should support anything that is going to be a product of the legislature until we at least see the original draft bill. The devil's in the details. I would also want to know what the cons are. There are always cons. And anytime government does anything, the law of unintended consequences rears its head. I would really like to know what people that are, if there are any people or organizations on the other side of this, would have to say. And the one question I have is, you indicated that there wouldn't be a profit motive unless it's going to be some kind of government created solar energy system or wind farm or whatever. Why would anyone build this stuff if they weren't intending on making profit off of it?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'm trying to find they did answer some of the arguments against CCE, which I had, and I'm having trouble finding now, but sorry, one second. I mean, most of the cons that have come out have been around potentially making it more difficult for Excel to manage that. But I'm not super clear on what that really means. And Erica, I know you know a lot more about this program than I do, if you have anything to add. But it seems like we're waiting to see what the legislation truly says. And so I wonder if going back to what we wrote before for the original legislation, which I think is attached in this agenda packet also, with the caveat of the guardrails that CC4CA have recommended. I know it doesn't really answer your question, Rich, but I'm trying to find the cons. Yeah.
Rich, I would say you raise a number of good points, and I would recommend looking at the policy statement from CC4CA. We've been members of CC4CA since 2018, and it was identified early on that, along with a community solar garden, membership in CC4CA was one of our biggest impacts to reach our goals. And one of our biggest challenges is Xcel, because they are a monopoly and a monopsony. They're the only buyer and the only seller of energy where we live. And
Erica, is that the
CC,
bullet point thing that was attached to the agenda?
no, probably not.
Okay.
So Leah can send it to you. I can send it to you as well. It should be on their website. They just updated it at the retreat in June. But I raised that because community choice aggregation has been around for a long time in California. The legislation, there was a bill that was passed to do a study on CCE or CCA in Colorado in 2021, and that's kind of what we supported. And now we're kind of coming back around with this information from this study session. And I think being skeptical is really important because, like you said, we don't know, and the devil's in the details. And it will change as a bill does. And CC4CA is now become an incredible powerhouse for legislation at the state level. And they use that guiding policy document, of which Nederland is a member. And there's, I think, 41 other community members of all political orientations and from the state and all different locations. And so CC4CA is going to be like right at the forefront of this bill to follow how it changes. And if at any point it doesn't become beneficial to their members and to their mission, their policy statement, they will sound the alarm and raise the flags. So I would recommend at this point we push because we need choices, right? We need more competition in our market. We need to be able to buy and source energy from other sources than just Excel. And so this gives us options, and I think that that's a beneficial thing. I'm sad Alan's not here because he's really been following this conversation, and he really was the person that brought it to the board in 2021 and said, "Hey, we should pay attention to this." I hope that answers some of your questions, but I think you're absolutely right. We have to pay attention to what this bill is going to turn out to be, and what those boundaries are going to be, and the pros and cons.
And I want to add that this bill that Colorado's drafting is based on learnings from California, Oregon, and some other states who have done this already and improved upon their program. And so one of the fail safes is that customers can opt out of this program. And in California, for example, the opt-out rate is 5 to 10%. So it has been met with a lot of support in just providing the opportunity to have competition. So Excel could still win that, right? If they come back with, say, lower rates and better source of energy, the community can still pick that. It's just opening up the marketplace so that another non-profit driven entity could say, I can provide this really affordable renewable energy at this rate, and we can choose whether or not we want to go through with that as a community. So it doesn't hold us to anything specific, like we would have to be tied to something specific. It's like opening up the choice as a community and could decide based on what's presented to us, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Another question I would have is, to me, this seems like a recipe to have our power grid up here become less reliable. Because if XL is just in the power grid business and not in the selling you electricity business, are they going to have the incentive to have the staff and the resources to repair, transformers or whatever it is when our power when our power goes out? Because they're not making nearly as much money off of this little 15% that they're getting as opposed to the whole thing try to sell us power. That's the kind of unintended consequence I would be really concerned about. And
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something should be.
And I understand you're talking about, we learn lessons from California, but is this the same thing that California had that led to like Enron and, power bills going up like by, multiple, because I seem to remember them doing something like this with wholesale electricity in California that led to a disaster.
I'm not sure about that particular example, but in reading what was put out for support for CCE is, and I quote, one of the biggest lessons from California is how not to do exit fees, and that it did cause some pain for them, and that Colorado is planning to do that differently than California had. I don't know if that's the same issue that you're talking about, but and I believe what Erica was referring to before was the lean energy white paper. Is that what you're referring to, Erica, where they looked at this nationally and analyzed what it would look like for communities, which is also, I think, attached in this packet, maybe for further reading.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Leah. I was just, as far as Rich's concerns for how the bill would change, I'm just trying to give some confidence in the process of CC4CA representing Nederland and Erie and all these other communities as far as climate action at the legislative level. And so if the bill changes, if the mission morphs, they're watching. And I think the email that we exchanged with Jacob Smith, their executive director, really reinforced that to me of they're already skeptical of this and what it's going to be on paper. And if it's actually going to be the climate win that it could be, or if it could be something else. So I was really just trying to speak, Rich, to like your point, like what is it actually going to end up being? I think if you all aren't involved with CC4CA, I think it's definitely worth listening to them. They just presented to a Front Range community this week, and I think they represented, gosh, they had like over 40 bills that they followed and they championed in this last legislative session. And at any point, they'll let it go if they feel like the mission has drifted, or they'll push to bring back what actually matters if it's lost. So it's a cool organization to learn more about and to follow.
Yeah, what I was gonna recommend, my personal recommendation is that we support it when CC4CA has a better understanding of what they're supporting, and we kind of follow their lead on it. I totally agree with everything you said, Erica. Nicole or Chris, thoughts?
Big fan of
No, don't.
CC4CA and believe in their process. So yeah, I agree. Let's just keep an eye on what they're doing with it and follow their lead.
Yep, that's fine.
Great. So I think that's it on my end, Melody.
All right. So the last thing on here is just an update that Leah sent along. I believe we all received it. The Colorado Energy Office launched their statewide e-bike discount program. So take a look at that on the agenda, spread the word to folks. Leah, is there anything in particular you guys are doing at Town Hall?
Peter's doing some outreach, but the application is closed as of this Monday, and they will reopen it September. So we're going to wait to until next month to advertise it again. It does have some income-based qualifications, so the rebate looks differently depending on what your income level is, and they're not retroactive, which is a major bummer. But yeah, take a look and spread the word around. It'd be great to take advantage of that program. And I don't think we have an exact date, but mid-September for the next round.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any other items? All right. If not, we can adjourn the meeting at 9:10 p.m. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Erica, for being here. It was so nice to have you again.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Erica.
y'all. I miss you all, but you are in such great hands with Leah. It's great to chat with you all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.